She had stopped believing in forever until someone stayed long enough to make her believe again. Alina had mastered the art of silence. Not the cold, dismissive kind. Hers was quieter, sharper, like a fortress carved from years of broken trust and promises that never meant a thing in the end. People often mistook her distance for pride. In reality, it was protection. She had given her heart too easily once, then again, and again, until there was nothing left but bruises and echoes of "I'll never hurt you," followed by the sting of betrayal. So she stopped giving, stopped hoping, stopped believing that love was anything more than a well-dressed lie. Then Zayn walked in. He wasn't extraordinary at first glance. No grand entrances, no smooth lines, just calm and shaken, like he'd lived 1,000 lifetimes and had finally arrived at hers. He met her at a mutual friend's dinner, one of those events she almost didn't attend. She sat at the far end of the table, sipping her drink slowly, speaking only when spoken to, but she felt his eyes, not in the intrusive, flirty way she'd grown tired of, but observant, curious. He didn't flirt, didn't press, just asked, "You okay being quiet in a room full of noise?" Alina blinked. No one had ever asked that. She gave a short nod. "I prefer it actually." Zayn smiled. "Me too." That was it. No spark, no magic, but something in her shifted. Over the next few weeks, he showed up not uninvited but present. Thoughtful texts, random book recommendations, occasional coffee deliveries when she mentioned she was tired. Never overbearing, never demanding, just there. Alina kept her distance, replied late, often cold. She watched, waited, expecting the moment he'd disappear like all the rest. But he didn't. He didn't knock on her walls demanding entrance. He didn't promise to break them either. He simply stood outside, gently reminding her with every act of kindness, "I'm here, whenever you're ready." One evening, after a particularly hard day, she found herself replying to his texts faster than usual. He had asked, "Rough day?" She typed, "Yes," then deleted it, typed again, "No, just life." Deleted that too. Finally, she sent, "Yeah, but thanks for asking." Zayn replied a minute later, "I won't ask for details, but I hope you know you're allowed to feel everything, even the hard stuff." Alina stared at the message longer than she wanted to admit. She didn't reply that night, but something cracked, not broken, just slightly open. He didn't mention it the next day, or the day after, as if sensing she needed space to breathe, not questions to answer. And slowly, very slowly, Alina started to soften. It wasn't love. Not yet, but for the first time in years, she didn't feel the need to run. Zayn never rushed her, and in a world where people were always trying to climb over her defenses, he was the first one who waited for the door to open, not because he was desperate to be inside, but because he respected what lived behind it. And for the first time, Alina wondered if maybe, just maybe, some walls weren't built to keep people out. Maybe they were built to see who would stay long enough to be let in. Some people speak in words. He spoke in moments. Zayn never needed grand gestures or poetic declarations. He never showered Alina with cliches or over-the-top compliments. Instead, he gave her something rarer. He noticed her, really noticed her. Like how she tapped her fingers against her cup when she was nervous. How her smile never quite reached her eyes when she was pretending to be okay. How she went quiet not out of boredom, but because her mind was spiraling and she didn't want to burden anyone with it. Alina wasn't used to being seen like that. People had always admired the surface, her looks, her calm exterior, the way she carried herself with quiet strength. But no one had ever taken the time to see beyond it, to ask what lived in the silence between her words. Zayn didn't ask. He just listened. They were sitting in a coffee shop one afternoon, the kind of place filled with soft music and the scent of roasted beans. Alina had been talking about something casual, her work, maybe, or a book she'd just finished. Then, without realizing it, she went quiet. Her fingers tapped the ceramic cup in that anxious rhythm she hadn't even known was a tell. Zayn reached out, not to stop her, but to gently place his hand near hers, anchoring her without a word. "You're spiraling," he said quietly. She looked up, startled. "What?" "That thing you do with your fingers. You've done it every time something's bothering you. You don't have to talk about it. I just want you to know I see it." Alina didn't know how to respond. Not because she was offended, but because no one had ever paid that much attention to something so small, so invisible. The truth was, she had spent years perfecting the art of hiding her storms behind practiced smiles and easy conversations. And here he was, sitting across from her like he could read the weather of her soul just by watching her hands. I'm not used to that, she admitted after a moment. To what? Being seen? Zayn's eyes softened. You should be. That's when she realized he wasn't trying to fix her. He wasn't looking at her like a puzzle to solve or a project to complete. He was simply trying to understand. And that, more than anything, disarmed her. Over time, she noticed it in other ways too, like how he remembered she hated surprise calls but loved late-night voice notes, or how he never forced her to open up, but left enough space in their conversations for her to share if she wanted to. And when she did talk, really talk, he didn't interrupt. He didn't rush to comfort her or fix the problem. He just sat with her in it. That meant more than any promise ever could. One evening, while they were walking through a quiet park, Alina turned to him and asked, "Why are you like this?" Zayn looked confused. Like what? Gentle, patient, like you're not afraid of all the parts of me most people run from. He smiled. Not the charming kind, but the soft kind that reached his eyes. Because those are the parts that matter most. And just like that, something settled inside her. Not love, at least not yet, but trust. Because in a world that had taught her to guard every piece of her heart, Zayn was slowly teaching her that maybe she didn't have to. Not with him. Not anymore. It wasn't the tears that broke her, it was the safety to let them fall. It had been raining for hours, the kind of rain that soaked the streets and slowed the world down, leaving only the soft patter of droplets against windows and the occasional hum of passing cars. Alina sat curled on the corner of Zayn's couch, legs tucked beneath her, arms wrapped tightly around a pillow as if it might hold her together. Zayn didn't ask what was wrong. He didn't offer cliches like, "It'll be okay" or "You're strong, you'll get through this." He just sat beside her, quietly, like a lighthouse in the storm, present, unwavering. The truth was, nothing catastrophic had happened that day. No big fight, no tragic event, just a slow build-up of the invisible weight she carried. The expectations, the memories, the ache of never feeling enough, no matter how hard she tried. She had spent her life being the strong one, the one who never cried in public, the one who offered advice but never asked for any, the one who built her identity on keeping it together even when she was falling apart inside. But something about Zayn chipped away at that armor. It started with the way he looked at her, not like someone fragile or broken, but like someone human. Then came the way he listened, really listened. And that night, in the warmth of his quiet presence, something inside her snapped. Her eyes welled up, and before she could stop herself, the tears fell. At first, she tried to hide them, turning her face away, brushing at her cheeks. But Zayn reached out gently, not to wipe her tears, but to hold her hand. "You don't have to be strong all the time," he whispered, his voice softer than the rain outside. And that was it. No big speech, no dramatic moment, just truth. Simple, honest truth. Alina let go. She cried, really cried. The kind of cry that comes from the chest, not the eyes. The kind that's been waiting for years, for permission to exist. And the whole time, Zayn didn't let go of her hand. He didn't flinch at her vulnerability. He welcomed it. She felt safe, and safety wasn't something she was used to. Not the kind that came without conditions. Not the kind that didn't require her to explain, or shrink herself, or apologize for feeling too much. When the storm inside her finally settled, she found herself leaning into him. Her head rested against his shoulder, her breathing slow and even. The silence between them wasn't heavy, it was healing. "Thank you," she murmured. "For what?" he asked gently. "For not making me feel weak." He looked down at her, brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "You're not weak, Alina. You've just been strong alone for too long." She closed her eyes, and in that moment, she understood something she never had before. Vulnerability wasn't weakness, it was trust. It was the courage to be seen fully, without hiding the bruises of the past or the fears of the present. With Zayn, she didn't have to perform strength. She didn't have to prove anything. She was allowed to just be soft, messy, real, and for the first time in years, she didn't feel ashamed of her tears. She felt loved, not because she was perfect, but because, with him, she didn't have to be. Real love doesn't rush. It waits quietly, faithfully until the heart is ready. There were days when Alina didn't call back, when her thoughts spiraled too loud for her to form words, when her fears convinced her she was too broken to be loved. On those days, she expected Zayn to pull away to give up like so many others had, but he never did. He didn't flood her inbox with guilt. He didn't demand explanations. He simply left a message. I'm here when you're ready. And he was, always. While the world asked her to hurry up, move on, get over it, Zayn waited, not out of obligation, but out of understanding. He knew she wasn't healing from just one heartbreak. She was unlearning years of believing she had to earn love by being perfect. She was relearning how to trust, not just someone else, but herself. And that kind of healing takes time. Zayn gave her that time. Some nights, when the weight of her past made her distant, she'd test him pulling back, emotionally retreating. She'd cancel plans last minute, pretend she was fine when she clearly wasn't, or become quiet for days. Part of her still feared that if she showed too much of her truth, he'd leave. But he didn't flinch. He'd send her pictures of sunrises, soft music recommendations, silly memes, gentle reminders that he was thinking of her, without pressing too close. Like a lighthouse, he didn't chase her into the storm. He just stayed lit, so she could find her way back when she was ready. And somehow she always did. What Alina slowly realized was that Zayn's love wasn't performative. It wasn't about grand gestures or dramatic declarations. It was in the quiet moments, the steadiness in his voice, the way he noticed the shift in her tone, the way he made space for both her strength and her scars. He made her feel like a person, not a project to fix, not a puzzle to solve. She remembered one evening when they were walking through a park. She had barely spoken all day. Her thoughts were tangled, and her heart was tired. She expected him to ask what was wrong, to push her to talk, but instead, he just reached for her hand. They walked in silence for nearly an hour, her fingers in his thumb brushing hers occasionally. That quiet companionship spoke louder than 1,000 words. When they finally sat on a bench, she whispered, "You're not tired of waiting?" He looked at her, a softness in his eyes that made her chest ache. "I'm not waiting for you to change," he said. "I'm just here, with you, however you are." She blinked back. Tears.it was in that moment she understood what made his love different. It wasn't about needing her to be happy all the time. It was about choosing her even in the hard moments, even when she couldn't fully choose herself. Zayn loved patiently, and in a world that rushed everything, feelings, healing, connections, his patience was revolutionary. He didn't demand timelines. He didn't measure her worth in progress. He loved her in the in-between, the becoming, the unfolding. And slowly, gently, Alina began to believe she was worth that kind of love. Not because she was healed, not because she was easy, but because he saw her, all of her, and stayed. That's when she realized, real love doesn't push. It waits, steady, warm, unshakable. Love didn't knock her over with fireworks, it arrived quietly, with tea and tenderness. It was a Thursday night in winter. The kind of night where the city curled under cold skies and everything felt heavier. Alina was sick, not the dramatic kind of sick that required hospitals, but the kind that made her bones ache, her head spin, and her walls go up. She didn't tell anyone, especially not Zayn. She hated looking weak, hated being cared for. She'd grown up believing she had to take care of herself, no matter what. So she stayed in bed, wrapped in silence, thinking if she slept enough, the fever would pass. But Zayn, he noticed even the silences. Earlier that day, he had called, and she hadn't answered. He texted, and all she replied with was a vague "just tired." He didn't ask questions, didn't press, but he came anyway. Around 8:30 p.m., she heard a soft knock on her apartment door. Too tired to get up, she dragged herself toward it, confused. When she opened the door, there he was, hoodie on, hair slightly wet from the drizzle. Outside, holding a paper bag in one hand and a paperback novel in the other. "Didn't want to bother you," he said gently. "Just wanted to make sure you were okay." She blinked, surprised, her fever-dazed mind trying to form a response. "I brought soup," he added with a shy smile. "And that book you mentioned last week, the one you said always makes you feel better." She didn't say anything. She couldn't. Her throat burned too much, and her heart, well, it ached, but in a different way now. He didn't push to come in. He just placed everything down by the door, the bag of soup, a box of tissues, her favorite chamomile tea, and the book, and said, "Rest well, okay? Call me if you need anything." Then he turned to leave. That's when she knew. Love wasn't fireworks or candlelit dinners. It wasn't loud confessions or dramatic kisses in the rain. It was him standing outside her door with soup and softness. It was how he remembered her favorite tea without needing to ask. It was in the quiet ways he showed up, not to fix her, but to comfort her. That night, after sipping the soup and curling up with the book, she stared at her ceiling for a long time. Her fever had dulled, but her heart was wide awake. No one had ever loved her like this before. No one had ever paid attention to the little things. The way she avoided people when she didn't feel well, the comfort she found in certain stories, the fact that she didn't know how to ask for help, but Zayn saw all of it. And instead of using her silence as an excuse to leave, he used it as a reason to lean in. He never made her feel like a burden. He made caring for her feel easy, natural. That was the night something shifted inside her. Love, she realized, doesn't always arrive with a declaration. Sometimes, it's in the quiet knock at your door, in soup that's still warm, in a book you forgot you mentioned. Sometimes, love doesn't need words. It just shows up and stays. And that night, in the stillness of her small apartment, wrapped in a blanket and Zayn's quiet kindness, Alina whispered to herself what she hadn't dared say out loud yet. This is love. Healing is not a straight line, but love, the patient kind, walks beside you anyway. Alina used to count days and distance. How long it had been since she last cried in front of someone, since she let someone in, since she believed anyone could stay. But with Zayn, the days blurred into something softer. It wasn't a grand shift. There was no defining moment where everything magically healed. Instead, there were quiet mornings where she found herself smiling before she remembered to guard it. Evenings where she'd tell him just a little more than she had the night before. It began with small things. She started texting first. Not just the safe hope your day's good, but things that mattered. Had a hard time sleeping last night, thinking about quitting my job. Do you ever feel like you're not enough? Questions she never dared ask anyone, because the answers were too raw. Zayn never replied too fast, never too slow. His answers were never perfect but always honest. He never tried to fix her. He just listened, really listened. One afternoon, sitting on a park bench with the winter sun low behind them, she looked at him and said, "I'm scared." Of what? He asked, gentle as always. Of letting you in too much. Of loving you more than I should. Of being happy, and then losing it. Zayn didn't flinch, didn't retreat. He just took her hand in his and said, "Then let's be scared together." That's when it started feeling like us. Not him waiting outside the walls. Not her pretending she didn't need anyone, but two people choosing to build something. Slowly, unevenly, but with care, she let him see the mess, her mood swings, her trust issues, the nights she overthought every word he said. And he stayed. Not because he didn't notice the cracks, but because he saw beauty in the pieces. They argued sometimes. Of course they did. Alina didn't always know how to say what she felt. And Zayn, with all his patience, wasn't perfect either. He'd go quiet when he was hurt. She'd push when she felt insecure. But they never walked away from each other. Instead of silence becoming space, it became a pause, a moment to breathe, not to break. Zayn started showing up in her world more. Not just in her home, but in her habits. She caught herself humming songs he liked, cooking dishes he once mentioned, folding his hoodie into her closet like it belonged there. One night, while they sat on her rooftop, legs dangling over the edge, Alina turned to him and asked, "What are we?" He looked at her for a long second, like he was measuring his words carefully. Then he smiled and said, "We're becoming." And she understood. They weren't a fairy tale. They weren't perfect, but they were something real, something honest. She wasn't waiting for him to leave anymore. She was learning to trust the way he stayed. Tio believed that love didn't have to come with conditions or ultimatums. That sometimes, love could simply be two people choosing each other over and over, even when it was hard, especially when it was hard. And so, day by day, brick by brick, Alina let go of the girl who believed love always meant pain, and in her place stood a woman learning to love and be loved for exactly who she was. Not perfectly, but deeply. That was becoming us. Some hearts don't just heal, they bloom. Alina never believed in fate. She used to roll her eyes at people who said things like everything happens for a reason or what's meant for you will find you. To her, those were just empty words people clung to when life didn't make sense. But then came Zayn, not like lightning, not like fireworks. He came like the slow, sure rise of the sun, quiet but undeniable. And somewhere between the patient silences, the shared laughter, and the nights where their souls spoke without needing words, Alina began to wonder. Maybe fate wasn't just about grand moments. Maybe it was about timing, about the people who walk into your life when you're finally brave enough to stop running. That evening, the sky was dipped in gold, not just any gold, but the kind that made everything feel softer, warmer, like the world had exhaled in peace. They were standing on the same rooftop where they had once counted stars and fears, but this time, there was no fear, only her hand in his, and the kind of stillness that comes not from silence, but from feeling whole. Alina looked at Zayn, really looked at him. The faint smile tugging at his lips, the lines near his eyes from all the times he smiled at her, the way his thumb absent-mindedly brushed against her knuckles, as if her presence alone calmed him. Do you know, she whispered, I once promised myself I'd never do this? Zayn turned toward her, brows raised gently. Do what? Fall in love again, she said, her voice barely above the breeze. Trust someone. Believe in something lasting. I swore I wouldn't. He didn't say anything right away. Just let the words settle in the space between them like fragile petals. And now? He asked softly. Alina took a breath, one that felt like it reached into her very soul. Now I don't know how I ever lived without this, she said. Zayn's hand tightened around hers. That's the thing about love, he said. The right kind doesn't demand you forget the pain. It just makes you believe healing is possible. She smiled not just with her lips, but with her whole being. For the first time in what felt like forever, she wasn't carrying her past like a weight. It had become a story. A story that led her here. To this version of herself, softer, surer, still scarred, but no longer defined by the wounds. She thought about all the nights she had cried herself to sleep, all the times she thought she wasn't enough, all the moments she convinced herself that love was only made for other people. And now here she was, not in some dream, not in some fairy tale, but in the arms of someone who loved her exactly as she was. I don't say it enough, she said, turning to him. But thank you. For what? For showing me I was never too hard to love. Just waiting for the right heart to see me clearly. Zayn leaned forward, pressing a kiss to her forehead. You were never invisible, Alina. You were just guarding a masterpiece. And in that moment, as the sky blushed with the final rays of sunset and the city began to hum below them, Alina didn't just believe in fate, she thanked it, for Zayn, for herself, for the journey that brought them here. Because sometimes, fate doesn't change your life in one grand moment. Sometimes, it simply hands you a hand to hold and waits patiently while you find the courage to take it.